Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Behind Frenemy Lines, where we get an opposition supporter on to talk about the game ahead this week. And we've obviously got Port Adelaide this week. So we have got on Anthony from the Pear. Welcome, mate. How's it doing?
Hello, mate. Great to be on and appreciate you having me on as well. And I'm looking forward to this week. It's going to be a lot more interesting than I first thought.
Yeah, I think if we were to have this conversation a week ago, before anything unfolded in the AFL world, it might have been a bit of a different chat, but maybe the results from the last fortnight for both our clubs might change the conversations ever so slightly.
Yeah, and the conversations around Port Adelaide have become this better be a win or else. So it's going to be something. I'm very excited, actually, especially to watch the young Tigers play. It's going to be interesting, but yeah, it's been a nervy week.
I can imagine. Before we get stuck into the game, firstly, how did you start to follow Port Adelaide and how did you get into the podcasting scene as well?
Yeah, so Port Adelaide was part of the family. Dad was the main supporter and grew up following him and wanted to be a Port fan like him. So I think the early 2000s we were very, very successful, obviously, and that sort of followed into all of that. And the rest of the family is actually all Crows, or mum's side and everything like that as well.
Wow.
So we were very niche. And I guess that sort of coincides with the podcast and the YouTube channel. It's like Port Adelaide has become this community that is niche, and it's very niche to me. And yeah, that's why it sort of started it. And in South Australia, there's always just so much Crows stuff. And there's like, do you watch the news bulletin? It'll be 5 minutes of the Crows and 1 minute of Port. So I wanted to create
a right? Is that
for that?
Even to this day, it's still weighted that way, is it?
Absolutely. The Crows could do no. They could have lost by 90 points on the weekend, but they'd still have a lot of promotion. So yeah, it's funny how South Australia works for the media, but yeah, I want to create a point of difference with the channel, and it's gone well for the last 7 years, let me tell you.
Yeah, and actually I got onto your channel because there's actually quite a few of our followers who said, you've got to get Anthony on. Like, they really love the graphic work you do and the way you break down the game and things like that. So I was recommended to you by our listeners. So, and I agree, your graphic stuff is unbelievably good. I'm very jealous.
Thank you very much. And now I've had a few people comment this week and see, they couldn't wait for me to be on, and I'm counting down the days and the hours today. So it'd be nice to talk a bit of footy. And look, you might have to tell me to shut up a couple of times because honestly, I just yap about footy and Port.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Before we get stuck into our game, I think from a Victorian perspective, we probably don't get a real good grasp of the rivalry between Adelaide and Port Adelaide. I don't know if it's changed over the years or not, but I suppose the picture gets painted to us that it's like full-on hatred at each other's throats. Is that how it feels now? Has it changed over the years? What's it like to you?
Yep, still very much hate each other's throats. It hasn't changed. I think the newer generation are sort of learning that whole concept of rivalry and everything like that. But as soon as you go to the first game, or as soon as you're born into it, it's like, yeah, you're either cutthroat or you're just going at each other, and it's still the same. And social media makes it 10 times worse as well, so it's even better.
Yeah, I know. It amplifies everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Like, you say one small thing, and you can't tell the difference between tongue in cheek on social media. So it's all out hell, really.
I'm sure that makes for some very interesting trolling and things like that on your shows along the journey, no doubt.
Yeah, but you can say that lightly. It's good fun though. Like, you read some of the stuff, and it's like, are you really saying that? But hey, it's the beauty of footy and the beauty of social media and the beauty of doing stuff like this is everyone gets an opinion, everyone is entitled to it, and that's what makes it fun and enjoyable.
Exactly right. The other thing, do you listen to SEN South Australia by any chance?
I do. Not always, but I do get around it, and to soak up anything you can.
Unbelievably, I was tagged in a tweet from a Richmond supporter yesterday that they used 80% of my comments from a podcast aimed at Mark Bickley, saying that we won't win a game. I'm like, I'm actually quite thankful they didn't take footage or the recording of the footage of me at the game, because I was yelling at Bickley again in that as well. I'm like, please don't play that bit. But yeah, so shout out to SENSA for chucking this on a audio package. That was nice of them. But yeah, there you go.
Walshy, my man. He loves the old, loves the socials, Walshy, so he'll get around it.
All right, now we've got a massive game coming up this week, Richmond against Port. Ironically enough, it's 7th versus 18th, but it's not us in 18th spot, which would have been what everyone was predicting heading into this game. Even us, we were predicting that too. So Richmond coming off a 13-point win against the Blues and Port Adelaide coming off a 91-point loss to the Pies. How does the game feel now this week in light of those results? I dare say it's a different feeling from last week to this week with the anticipation of what may lay ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of pessimism this week. I know this. It's very difficult to gauge Port Adelaide at the moment because you come into round one and it's like, oh, you play a Collingwood outfit that came off a pretty disappointing GWS loss, and it's our first game of the year, and I'm very much excited to see what we do. Put out a poor performance like that, and we're back to the old. Everyone hates Ken. You move him on. We're playing Richmond. Worst case scenario. And it's very confronting, but I think, home crowd, a very big milestone for Travis Boak this week, playing the all-time record ever for a Port Adelaide player
Oh, really?
in the
Okay.
club's history. So he'll be playing game 393 as a Port Adelaide
Wow.
human being.
That's
And a
crazy.
Port Adelaide player. So 373 in the AFL and then 20 official AFL preseason games as well. So he'll be covering Russell Ebert, who had 392. So very big milestone for him. So it's a lot to play this week, I think, more than just the 4 points.
He's one of the good guys of football, I think, Travis Boak. I'm actually kind of glad you held on to him because I felt like that he had a bit of a leadership role to play for some of your younger guys as well. And he hasn't really slowed down. I think he was your 3rd highest possession getter last week.
Yeah, I thought it was best on ground, and it's very easy to pick him when we lose by 90 points. There's not a lot of standouts, but yeah, he's the greatest footballing person I think you'll ever meet. I think he's incredible for the game, incredible for the club, and incredible for people. And I think, so I heard a quote today that I think it was Brett Ebert said it in the press conference today that we had, and he said that no human being that supports football or another club will have a bad word to say about Trav. We're a player, fans, no matter what. I think everyone respects him, and I think that's exactly right. So he's deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. He seems like an absolute ripper. Now, the word succession plan has obviously been thrown around quite a bit over your neck of the woods. How is the overwhelming feeling of how this is going now? There's been a lot of speculation that the players not buying it anymore. Is Ken lost the drive, which I'm sure is probably all bullshit. But what's your take on the succession plan? Do you think announcing it so early is going to impact your 2025 season, or was round one just a small blip on the radar?
The succession plan was announced at a very, very poor time. I agree with the idea. I disagree with this farewell tour that Ken needs to have, I guess. That narrative just doesn't sit right with me, especially announcing at the start of the year, in particular when it's even more validated when they lose by 90 points last week. And it's hard to say that had an impact because it could be a blip in the radar and you don't have enough of evidence to suggest it is. But the one thing Port Adelaide have been very good at under Ken the whole time is have a bad week and the next week they respond really well. But yeah, the succession plan, that's going to be the story of the year for Port. Nothing else. It won't matter. It's Ken and his men, and then Josh Carr will start his car. That's basically the two gists we'll get.
Yeah, and the bounce back is what worries me the most about this week because, I mean, you've obviously copped a pasting in the media. Ken's going to want to bounce back. The boys are going to want to bounce back for Ken in his farewell year. So it could get nasty early for us. If we can somehow weather the storm, though, and maybe pinch a few goals early, it might just put some nerves through the Port players. But I am a little bit scared as to how hard you guys are going to come out.
Yeah, I think we'll have a good response come game day. We haven't been a typical fast starting side in particular. So I think the fire will be there. There's obviously the home crowded difference as well. The one thing, I guess, the adjustment for the Tigers boys this week is I want to see how the kids sort of travel.
Yep.
Like we've seen them big at home crowd, and everything was awesome to watch, and the momentum swung. But be interesting to see how the boys go against the grain. I guess, momentum wasn't your way last week, and then you turned it around with a home crowd, but this week could be a little bit different. And look, if there's the thing that's going to make a difference this week, it won't be the players for Port Adelaide on the field. It'll be the 40,000 fans there this week. So that's the interesting thing for me. I want to see the difference from last week.
Yeah, and we obviously had a bit of a mini trip in the pre-season to Perth, but it doesn't really feel anything like the real deal when you're doing it in an AFL season. And the Port environment is very hostile. I was at Adelaide Oval for the infamous, was it 2014 elimination final when Cochrane?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a spine-tingling atmosphere, but for all the wrong reasons for me. The game was over very quickly. But yes, I can only imagine the amount of noise that the Power fans will make. Given you've come off a hefty loss, well, number one, did you get through unscathed injury-wise? And if so, do you see any other forced changes coming your way for this game?
No forced changes in terms of injuries. I think we got through relatively okay. In terms of changes itself, I think the way our dynamic worked up forward, and I know we're adjusting to a slightly different game style without Charlie Dixon, but it seems to be old habits die young with us. So I think Ollie Lord will come in play this week, especially with seeing quite a bit of Ollie Wines rucking last week, which is just stupid in my opinion. So I think Ollie Lord will come back in. I think Aliir Aliir will play as well. I don't think Finn Layson's going to play this week, especially down that back row, and his attitude was very poor last week. So if there's any changes, probably be those two. And I think Lockie Jones was subbed out quite early last week, so Ryan Burton will probably come in for him. They're my prediction for changes, but I don't know with Ken. Ken could pick an unchanged lineup for all I know.
That'd go down well, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's a taller set of inclusions then. So you would keep Georgiades in alongside Lord?
Yeah, so I'd have the three pillars with Lukosius playing higher up, Georgiades as the lead up, and then Ollie Lord is that's that second to third, but big tall forward. Gives an opportunity for Jordan Sweet to rest and go off, or rest down forward as well. So it's going to be quite hot this week. I think about 29 degrees in the sun. So I think a good opportunity for Sweetie to take a bit of rest, because Nankervis will work him over. Nankervis is a terrific ruckman, and watching him last week against DeConey, he worked so hard. So I think having a chop out like that will be a lot more beneficial for Jordan Sweet.
Interesting you mentioned the heat, and interesting you mentioned about Ollie Wines in the ruck, because we obviously did something similar with Camden McIntosh, and Jacob Bauer was one stage in the ruck, which I wasn't a fan of. So if you're going to bring in another tall, there's been a lot of question marks from our end about will it be Samson Ryan that comes in for Tom Lynch, because he can obviously ruck and play forward, although he's not great at either. He's okay at ruckman, but his forward craft's not too good at AFL level. But then we have Liam Fawcett, who hasn't played a game at AFL level yet, but he's been doing really well at VFL level, kicked 3 goals in the weekend, who's been doing pretty well from a forward perspective, but then he may have to back up ruck. But I don't know what his backup rucking capability is like, because we can't send Bauer in. And if you're playing another tall, it kind of means we can't play Ben Miller in the ruck either, because we'll need him down there as well as Jacob Blight. So that might be interesting. If we think you'll play Lord, we might have to play Ryan. That's a win for Port, I think.
I think I did think about Lynch missing, and regardless of Lynch or not, I think the way he sort of played last week, even he kicked 1 or 2 last week, but he was still presenting, was still a force in the contest, and just Smalls were able to go to work. So I think if you can plant someone there that does that trick and can chip in the ruck, no matter the talent, I think that's the better way to go for both sides, I believe. But I think if you can get away, I think a lot of clubs are trying to do it these days. You can get away with a smaller player trying to ruck out certain contests, to have your ruckman behind the ball or resting. They're going to do it, and Ollie Wines is big enough head, so could do it, but I'd rather someone else going in there.
Yeah, it's almost like teams go in with 1.5 ruck. They just back anyone else to do it. Like when we saw Carlton put Patrick Cripps in there, it's like, what are you doing? He's like your Rolls Royce. If he gets hurt, you're in for a world of pain. But they're just so strong around the contest, those big midfielders. So I can understand why teams would do it, because you want to keep leg speed as well. I mean, if we bring in, I suppose, Ryan for Lynch, we don't lose too much either way for speed, because Lynch is obviously on the older side and not so quick. But like you said, his presence and his ability to make a contest deep and up the ground is pivotal. And it's probably a big reason why we didn't score much last year, because we just haven't had him. So the fear is that I actually think defensively we might match up okay on you. Our defense isn't so bad in the back line. If the midfield push back and help out, even better. I just think without Lynch, we might actually struggle to kick a goal from a structure standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. And the way we sort of play and the way we like to play is having a slow entry into our defensive 50. And if we can do that, we either can get an intercept mark, or we have our, it's a slower forced entry, which means it will create a stoppage, which lets our midfielders go to work. So sort of similar way up our end as well. If we can get, multiple forward entries inside 50, we'll have an opportunity. But I agree with the defensive structure. Miller last week was absolutely phenomenal. I think
he had a good game.
That was his best game in AFL footy. I haven't seen a lot of him, but I think the presence he had, and against Mackay, who he wore as a wet paper towel, to be honest.
There's been a lot of criticism on Miller as well from Richmond supporters. I think his last 4 or 5 games in 2024, and the whole team was crap, but he had a real bad patch, and he kind of transferred that into a little bit of 2025. But prior to that, he was actually ranked top 10 or 15% in the AFL for halving or winning one-on-one contests. So defensively, he's been relatively sound, but then sometimes would make the odd bad decision with the ball. But it's just bridging that gap between his best and worst. And Jacob Blight did okay as well. I thought he was really good until he went off injured. It sounds like he'll be a fitness test, but if he doesn't get up, it'll be someone like either Campbell Gray will come in, who again hasn't played AFL yet, but has showed some promising signs in the VFL, or Jacob Kazitsky, who has actually done okay to reinvent himself in the back line. I don't know which one. I think they would probably go towards Kazitsky if they had to pick one, but I would personally go Campbell Gray, but we'll see what happens there. Joe Berry, new recruit. How exciting does he look? He was probably one that a few clubs were trying to get after.
Yeah, I was very. It's funny because you picked up Luke Trainer in the draft, and he was the one I was eyeing at our first pick. And once we sort of traded up, I was like less likely to think he'd get selected at our first round selection. And the more I sort of adjusted to that, Joe Berry was the option, and he was touted as one of the best small forwards in the draft. Robbie Gray selection, which he has some prior form with Zach Butters as well as the selection. So I trust Robbie with my life, even after footy. And I think, he has the ability to... what I saw in preseason, his gut running, his ability to change direction, those short 15, 20-metre kicks. Unfortunately, last week, didn't get to have the opportunity to put it on show. But he's going to be one to look out for, and I'm very excited to see him. And even again, like Joe Richards, the two Joes, those two working in tangent, I think will be a damaging force up in our forward half. And I'm very excited about Joe Berry. He's very good.
It was a good pick. Yeah, well played. A good pun. He's going to be a very good pickup. Now, you mentioned Jack Lukosius before. He obviously made his way across from the Suns. What have you made of that pickup? Have you seen the value that he's going to add to your forward line already just throughout the preseason and round one, or is it still too early to tell?
Definitely seen the value in what he can bring. It'll be a matter of what will the rest bring to him. If he's going to really become a striking force and be that great lead up forward, because the way we have changed our style and wanting to move the footy, his adaptation will be, I think, a point of difference if we get it right. His lead-up ability is sensational. His kicking side 50 is elite. We know what he can do with the footy. Without the footy, he's helpless. And I think in the long run, I think it'll work out well. Once we get the forward movement down pack, he'll have a greater impact. Kicked the first goal last week. He's good on the ground and has a great ability. So he could come out kick 5 this week and we'd all be happy.
He's actually a player that troubled us when he was at the Gold Coast. He was always able to get off the chain for what we just may not have the right matchup for him. If I was to think of someone now, I'm guessing it's going to be someone like Broad or Vlosten that might go to him, or maybe someone even suggested on our Monday night show, do you send Luke Trainer to him, just even as a learning thing, because Trainer probably can match him from a height perspective, maybe not strength, obviously, but has the fitness, hopefully, to go with him for a little bit of it. But it might just be a good learning for Luke Trainer to play on a Lukosius.
Yeah, I think Luke Tran will be a very nice selection for Mitch Georgiadis as well. I think they bodily wise probably match up a little bit better. Um, I think, once you start adding the Ollie Lords or the Jordan Sweets and stuff like that, you probably go with a bigger body. But
Yeah,
Lukosius is if Luke Trainer would be a very good matchup for the tank. I think more so because Lukosius does work up and down quite well. Um, Very difficult matchup though, and it's not just because it's Lukosius. It's just those types of forwards are so hard to match up on because
yeah.
they move so quickly. They can take a mark, and they're elite with their skills. So it's very difficult, I think, to even manhandle anyone.
Yeah, agree. And I think that's why he's tore us up every time, because we just haven't got it right, or we haven't done well enough team defensively to contain him. He's a beautiful kick of the ball when he gets it too. What are the key things that you think Port need to do this week to win the game? Obviously, a lot needs to change from last week, but what are some of the key things you want to see done differently?
Um, I'd like to see some effort at the contest. We saw last week that Ollie Wines obviously had to ruck. We have no Zach Butters. Willem Drew was very, very quiet. I think the impact of Pal Pepper was sporadic. Um, you know, Players like Jackson Mead weren't having an impact. Everyone has to lift, and for us, in such a game where every team has to have 20 to actually play and perform, you can't be carried. That's where we see the best teams do well. Everyone has a role. Everyone knows their role. I think with us, it's a little bit cloudy. So what do you do when things don't go your way and are struggling? Make it up at the contest. You're the one that's first in, you're getting the hard ball, you're making sure you're putting pressure on, you're doing the basics. So we didn't do a lot of the basics last week. And this week I really want to see that and show some fight. This is a special week for one of the club legends. This is a first home game, member recognition round for us, and I think that's the fight's the key word, to be honest.
I think that's all most clubs want to see from their players, isn't it? If you're going to lose, go down fighting and at least have a dip for 4 quarters, and I think people will walk away relatively comfortable with it. But what about some of the weakness areas? What do you think are the weakness areas that Richmond can target to try and pick Port apart? I mean, got such a young group. Contested ball's probably been one that we've maybe struggled with for a little bit. We usually either lose clearances badly or we win clearances, but our effectiveness is very much nullified.
I think our clear weakness is speed going into our defensive 50. So if you get us on a turnover, you're almost guaranteed to kick a goal. Especially like last week, watching Richmond, the way they were able to move the footy, utilize that corridor turnover and really have an impact on their pressure. They didn't let Carlton pierce through any gaps. So I think we like to play that chipping game and force our way into the corridor and get that quick run. So putting pressure on the ball carrier will probably be key. We can make mistakes. Our skills can be let down with pressure on them. And if you can slow us down and don't let us get that handball run game going and get us on the turnover, that's where you absolutely hurt us the most. I think in the ruck as well, Nankervis he's the key. If your midfield, if like Taranto and Hopper was fantastic last week too, I thought.
Yeah.
And anyone else that goes through there too, that's going to have their opportunity. Nankervis is going to be the key. So if he gets first use of it, have an impact on the clearances because we're a clearance side and we can do damage. It's one thing to get clearances, the other do damage inside 50. So, yeah, I think they're probably the two main areas, making sure when we have the footy, put the pressure on. When we don't have the footy, just get first use.
And speaking of Nate, we'll chat about some of the matchups quickly. And you've hit the first one on the head. I had Nankervis up against Sweet. Sweet really come on in leaps and bounds, I think, last year, passing Soldo as your preferred ruckman. And I Soldo had some injury issues as well. But yeah, this is going to be a huge contest. I thought Nank did really well against De Koning, where I thought De Koning might have got the better of him pre-game just because of his athleticism. But Nank's just shown his willingness to bash and crash and scrap and fight. So yeah, I think a big part of the way forward for us is to make sure we don't give you guys easy first use out of the middle, which we sometimes give up a little bit too easily, and sometimes it's down to our lack of pace in there. But interesting that you mentioned about your lack of pace too. If both teams are sort of similar in that front, maybe it won't hurt as much.
Yeah, and I think without butters, the speed slows down. I think the one thing that might be a point of difference is Horn Francis, and we haven't mentioned him yet, but he's obviously speed and carry the footy will be electric. So, and he had a bit of a quieter week last week. Had I think 25 and just a goal. So I think, yeah, if it's a scrappy game in the contest and Nank's getting his experience of his week working, then I think the ability to utilize the ball and just be patient with our like if we're patient, it means you've slowed us down and done really well. And if the Tigers have got the footy and they're patient with it, they can pierce us. There's an absolute gap. They're always to get inside 50. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting midfield matchup, especially with the indifference of pace, I reckon.
Yeah. The Horn Francis one's a good shout. He is a player who can turn a game on its head very quickly by pushing forward and just getting dangerous. As Pommy and Oz drops in the chat. How are you, Pommy? Welcome, mate.
Pommy, my man.
But yeah, Horn Francis is an absolute game winner. So he is one we have to watch. But the player I think we're going to put a bit more time into, I think we're going to go with McIntosh on Connor Rozee. McIntosh obviously did the job on Cripps last week, and even though Cripps has still got 32, 33 touches, he just didn't have the same effectiveness because we were able to limit his impact with the use of ball. I think he only got 210 or 215 metres gained, which is quite low for Cripps. I think Rozee had your most disposals last week and is a prolific ball winner. So we're going to have to find a way to stop him. And usually in years gone by, we've not used taggers. So number one, how does Rozee usually cope with a tag if that's been done before? It maybe he hasn't seen it too much because you've got Butters and Horn Francis and a whole raft of midfielders who deserve attention as well. And do you think he's someone that can be kept quieter if paid close attention to?
Yeah, I think so. I think his ability to win the footy is one thing for Connor. The other thing is I think he's a little bit more damaging than Patrick Cripps with the ball, and that's not to say Patrick Cripps isn't a good footballer, but it's just I think Connor's ability to utilize his pace and his speed and his dancing wit when it comes to using the footy, I think is a lot more prolific. So I mean, he could be tagged out of the game, still have 25, and I think he'd have more of an impact than a Willem Drew with a 30 type of thing. So I think you definitely have to put someone on him with, especially this week, I think, because he's the main focal point now. You can't really tag Horn Francis. He's going to play some forward minutes as well. Mead and Drew through there. Wines is not going to do as much damage as Rozee, and you're not really going to tag a 37-year-old Travis Boak. So I think you put him on, see how it goes. Even if Rozee gets away, and try and nullify his impact. But Rozee, the other good thing about Connor Rozee is his ability as a captain to know the moment, seize the moment. There was a game last year we played against the Western Bulldogs at home where we just got pumped by Brisbane a couple of weeks earlier, and he came out, had 35, kicked 2 goals, and was best on ground in a performance that was sort of solidifying as a captain. So I think similar could happen this week.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating because there's definitely valid reason to even potentially try and clamp down on Horn Francis as well. But yeah, he obviously has the ability to play forward. Although McIntosh, I don't mind him playing defensively. He's played as a defender a little bit in the past. I think he's got the tank to go with either if he has to, but it's just trying to work out which one's going to hurt us the most. And maybe he swaps somewhere in between. Hopper has to do some type of a caretaker job on someone as well. But Pommy reckons that McIntosh is a bit like COVID. He's everywhere, just causing lockdowns everywhere. It's a fair call. And the beauty of being a hot game over there is we're going to see the black headband again on Camden, which is a great look for the ball player.
Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, I know. We've said it before. If the club doesn't sell these in the shop, they're crazy. That is money ready to be made easily. That's a good call from Pommy. What about Crits tagging Wines? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, Wines is another one who can get off the chain and cause damage too. I think there's going to definitely be some serious options we have to consider. Who do you think would be if you were to let a player run free, who would cause the most damage out of Horn Francis, Rozee, and Wines?
That's a good question.
They probably do it in different ways, though, don't they? The damage.
Yeah, Horn Francis can get you on the scoreboard a lot more because he can play deep inside 50, and he could have a game where he only has 14 touches but will kick 4 goals, and that's a match-winning performance. Whereas Rosie relies on his touches. He'll work hard and is a prolific ball user. Wines I wouldn't tag because he's just going to go in there, bulldoze everyone and get the handball out. You can't tag that, in my opinion. Like, he's such a big presence at the contest that it's like, I don't really want to tag Ollie because you're just impacting what's on the inside of the contest, and what's going to damage you is on the outside. So I'd probably tag Rosie because he's going to have that a lot of midfield time, probably the easier to tag, and you can always defensively nullify Jason Horne-Francis' impact down forward. What does worry me on the flip side is Richmond's ability now to have so many different ball users, and Jack Ross has been one that caught my eye last week. Sam Lawler could have a similar game last. He had 18 touches and they were all damaging. So, it's who does Willem Drew go to? That's my question.
I was thinking about this the other day on the back of the type of defeat you had and the response that Port Adelaide's going to be looking for. I have this weird feeling that your players might try and ruffle up Sam Lawler early, just to try and send a message like, you're in the big time now. You're over here in South Australia in front of a hostile environment. Are we a chance to see the Port guys just pile in a bit on Samuel Lawler, try and ruffle his feathers?
Look, if we're not going to target Dan Houston, who just free willingly left the club last week, I don't think so. If we still had Charlie Dixon...
Did you not target him? I thought you might have had a crack. Oh.
No, we were happily sitting there after the game with our legs crossed like kindergartners waiting to shake his hand. So last year we had Harley Reid play his first game of AFL footy at the Adelaide Oval, and I remember Charlie Dixon just running right through him. So there's a possibility. Yeah, I wish he was back. He will be there this weekend and doing a lap of honour to celebrate his career, so maybe we'll just get the Guernsey on him.
Just cop a couple of weeks to send him out there.
He'll be happy. He can go back to his garage.
The last matchup I want to talk about quickly is, and this is probably going to be pivotal for our chance to win the game, if there is one at all. We need to stop Aliir Aliir's intercept marking. He's exceptionally good at it. The way he reads the ball is ridiculously good. And I'm kind of making it a similar comparison to Wiedering and how good he plays for Carlton. And the way we ended up nullifying him in the second half is we sat Jacob Bauer on Wiedering and just made him super accountable, try to take him deep and get him out of the contest. I feel like this is one of the only ways especially without Lynch now, this kind of has to happen even more so and be really, really effective. Because if we let Aliir take intercept marks, it is game over.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he didn't really get much of an opportunity to even try that last week, Aliir. So I think that's very, very important. And he is the key pillar down back. Finlayson isn't going to do that job. Radic Aliir, if he comes back in, won't do that job. I think the only other one that could possibly slip in and take that sort of intercept ability would be Miles Bergman, because he has a great ability to read the play really, really well. So I think targeting Aliir is going to be the safe bet, though. That's the one you've got to make sure that you take out of the game. But he'll still find a way. Like he has the ability. He has the ability just to work himself into the contest, and if he's not going to take the mark, he'll punch it outside. He'll make sure he's doing the groundwork. So. But he'd definitely be the target for me to tag.
I think we have to. And that was one of the things we did really well last week as the game got on is even someone like Harry Armstrong in his first game was crashing packs and didn't let his direct opponent mark the ball. And I think this is why Richmond supporters are a bit more concerned about Samson Ryan coming in, because even though he's relatively good in the ruck area, we just find he doesn't compete as hard in those forward contests. His direct opponent will often outposition him and take a mark, and then they're off and away on transition football. Whereas it was good to see a first gamer show that kind of ferociousness at the contest. So we'll need a combination between him, Armstrong, Bauer, Force, whoever plays is going to have to make sure that Aliir is accounted for at all times. Even kick the ball on the ground, just grubber it in. Who cares? Just don't kick it in the air.
He has the ability to fall over, so you never know. But I think with Aliir, it's almost like if you take him out of the contest, the rest of the back line almost falls apart. So it's a no-brainer in my. And if you don't, well, then you're just hoping the ball. Well, we're hoping the ball doesn't go down there too much.
Yeah, and if we don't, it'll be over very quickly.
The
amount of times last year that we would kick the ball just long down the line to a contest, and opposition centre half backs would just pluck it out of the air and away they go. we can't be doing that again. Pommy wants to know from you how you feel about Lukosius.
Yeah, like I said before, I was pretty happy with his output in pre-season. His game against St Kilda at Moorabbin was really good. I thought he had a difficult opportunity last week, obviously with how everything was on the field. So I think he's a point of difference for us this year compared to what Charlie was. I think we just got to. It's not about Lukosius, it's more about everyone else adapting to him being down there. And once they do that, I think he's going to have a great impact. And I like that we aren't doing what Dimmer did or what Stewie Jew did as Gold Coast coach. And we're just playing him as a mainstay key forward. He's not going down back. He's not swinging anywhere, not going on the wing, not in the midfield. He's going where he was drafted, and that was a key forward.
And Eric wants to know, a good question, what's your thoughts on Kane Cornes, the media personality?
Yeah, Eric, Kane's that anti-hero for a lot of Port fans. Love him as the footballer, and he's a legend of the club, premiership player, 300 games and all of that. And you just see some of the comments that he puts out, and it's like, oh, you're right there, Kane. I don't have a big, strong opinion on Kane Cornes. I think it's become a lot more of a, that footy pundits are sort of, I like that he's on the show called Agenda Setter, because he really is. He's just giving everyone something to talk about. And I don't like a lot of his views on Port Adelaide. I think he's a little bit soft on Ken and things like that. But at the same time, I think he's great for the game. We need that. We need that someone that's pushing the boundaries, because, there's too many one-eyed people, or there's too many people that just like to throw a comment out there and to clickbait, but they don't actually believe it. Whereas Kane, he's taking you on a walk down at the beach with the top off and telling you how he feels. So it's kind of a good thing.
And whether people disagree with these comments or not, ultimately he's doing his job perfectly well by getting his articles and comments spoken about. And that's exactly what his boss would be wanting. So yeah, you can only commend him for that. But he has taken target at us a few times over the journey. I'm not sure if we've upset him along the way, but no, he's doing his job. He's doing his job well.
He doesn't like Tim Taranto's game, I guess.
Not in the top 150. Jeez. Thanks for stopping by, Pommy, as well. Good luck to the Blues as well for tomorrow night. Hawk Tim, look, I reckon Jonty Fall was probably about 3 or 4 weeks away. I think he's going to be one that we'll see come in for Armstrong at some stage. But again, his VFL game was limited minutes, but he was bashing and crashing packs, exactly why we had to hold him back in pre-season so he didn't hurt anyone. It's a shame he didn't get a full pre-season in, because this would have been the perfect time for him to come in and play a role. Maybe Tom Sims is a sneaky chance as well. He could actually be another one we might favour over Ryan, because he can play forward and ruck as well, but he's just very raw and inexperienced. So ultimately, though, I don't think it matters who we put in up forward. It's going to be a very inexperienced looking forward line, unfortunately, which could be our downfall.
Harry Armstrong, I like the look at last week as well, actually.
Yeah, and he only had about 3 or 4 possessions, but it was one of the better 3 or 4 possession games that I've seen. And he did the same thing the week before against Collingwood in our practice game. And it wasn't so much about he didn't take many marks or get many kicks, but it was the fact that he was prepared to put his body on the line, smash into the packs, crash contest, and then that part at the end where he had the awareness to pass the ball to Bauer in the goal square instead of having a blazing away shot himself. Just showed a little bit of maturity this week, which was nice. So he's going to have a big role to play this week in the absence of Tom Lynch. Look, I think, unfortunately, Lynch being out probably throws it in your favour a bit more if it wasn't already in your favour. But with that said, what do you think the tip for the game's going to be, and what's your margin as well?
Yeah, I'm tipping Port Adelaide by 33 points. I sort of live by the fact that I think similar sort of proposition to last year's game, actually, at the MCG. It was quite a scrappy sort of affair, and we sort of ran away with it in the end. I think it'll be very similar to that. And I believe we'll just have that bounce back game after, Ken Hinkley's ridiculed, poor performance last week, players come out and do the typical, right, let's get the win. And it's just great that we come up against a young, inexperienced Tiger side, because we just love beating up on the younger clubs. It's just fantastic. It really just solidifies our points, really.
it's almost a lose-lose in a way. Like if you win, people are like, oh, it was just Richmond. And then you might drop another one in a couple of weeks' time and everybody piling into Ken again. He's almost in a no-win situation.
Yeah, definitely. We've got Essendon next week at Marvel on a Thursday night. They could be 0-2 this week because they played the Crows, and then you got St Kilda at home and then gather around against the Hawks. So it's like you won't really know. And, it's just simply one you just can't drop.
And I think Port will get the job done. I think the bounce back's going to be too strong for us to handle. I still reckon we might hang around for a half or so. It really depends on how the first quarter plays out, because it's going to be hot early, I think, especially from your perspective. If we can hang tough for the first quarter and a bit and it's not blown out, maybe things change and we get on a bit of a roll again. But it's going to be a big ask for the kids to do that again a second week in a row. But it'll be fascinating to see how they respond too. They'll be full of confidence and belief in themselves. Stranger things have happened. There's been a few times in the past we've head over to Adelaide against Port with a VFL-like team and got the job done. So we can somehow manage that again. Is it too big to say that if we happen to do the unthinkable and win, does Ken struggle to survive past that? Will the pressure just be too much, or will he see it out?
Knowing the way we handle things, he'll see it out. Because I don't think we have the balls to do it, essentially. I don't think we have that grunt in us to say, all right, no, that's it. You've just lost to a Tigers outfit. Because the excuse now is if we lose to Richmond this weekend, you have that win under your belt. You have that Carlton win. So it's almost like, oh, you guys bet Carlton. It's all okay. Like, we're a struggling club now. There's an excuse there for Port. And
yeah.
I don't think I personally would say, no, enough's enough. You can't be losing that. But I think it's almost impossible for him to not be sacked.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a fascinating game on the weekend, Anthony. I appreciate you coming on tonight to talk about the game. All the best with your podcast as well. Make sure you guys go check it out. I know a lot of our listeners did point me in your direction, and for good reason. So for any Port fans who are tuning in who aren't following the Pair, make sure you jump on the YouTube channel, which is in the description, and give him a follow. Anthony, thank you so much, mate, for coming on tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me, mate. It's a pleasure to be on, and all the best to the Tigers this week, and hopefully it's a good affair.
Yep, fingers crossed we just get a good game out of it. So
exactly,
all the best, and hopefully everyone has a good time and gets along to the game. Should be a cracking crowd. It'll be very one-sided, but it should be entertaining nonetheless.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you again. Until next time, everybody, go Tigers.